How are you?
I'm good, dude. I'm good.
You hit me with some knowledge earlier
Oh, dude, I fucked up
today.
your world. So I'm reading the Four Agreements,
Uh-huh.
which is not it's more of a pamphlet than it is a book, but
My kind of read.
yeah, I know it's pretty short. It's all about like the agreements that we make with ourselves and with the world unconsciously and consciously throughout our lives, and there's really only four that you need to make throughout your life and live by these, and you can live a happy life. One, be impeccable with your word. Like your word is your bond. Everything you say out of your mouth, you mean it.
Mm-hmm.
Two, and this is the one that got you, never take anything personally, no matter what. And this is like, here, I'll list the other two,
That's
but we're gonna
me.
come back.
Yeah,
We're gonna come back to that. The third one was never assume anything ever.
Okay.
Don't ever make an assumption about anything.
Okay.
Because it'll never be what you expect it to be. And then number 4 is do your best. Do your best. Everything you do your best at it. Maybe your best one day isn't going to be as good as your best another day, but it's still your best on that day. But number 2, and I've been since I read this rule, your word, don't take things personally, don't make assumptions.
Assume, do your best.
Do your best.
Always do your best, okay.
But number 2 and 3 are like very prevalent things that you can practice every day. They all are, but like those ones are specific. And so don't take things personally. For the past like 2 weeks since I read that sentence, I was like, every time I would feel like some kind of anxiety or pain by what someone did or someone said or something I saw, I would immediately think to myself, you're taking that personally. And I realized just how prevalent that is in almost every situation in life. When you're like, even to you have to take it to an extreme. Like, even to go as far as saying, like, if you have a spouse cheat on you, you have to think your hardest. Take your ego out of the equation. Think your hardest that is not. You shouldn't take it personally, because that means that something is wrong with that person, but it's not wrong with you. There's something wrong with that other human being who accosted you, who shot you, or something. Even if someone shoots you, and it sounds crazy, don't take it personally.
Yeah.
And we're not all going through situations that are that heavy, but if you can bring that concept down to the smallest things. Someone doesn't ask you to go to a party, something like that. Someone doesn't include you on a group text. It's just something as small as that. And if you can learn to not take those things personally, I've noticed in the last 2 weeks, the sheer amount of anxiety that I feel on a daily basis, everyone feels some sort of anxiety when they're thinking about a stressful situation, has dropped immensely. Because everything I'll think, I'm only upset because I'm taking it personally, and it has nothing to do with me. If you can just memorize those 2 phrases, I'm only upset because I'm taking things personally, it has nothing to do with me. If you can memorize those and really think of it every time you get upset, you realize just how much that applies to everyday life. When we were up there talking,
I don't like it, but you're right.
Every time you
I don't
would
like
say
it,
something,
but you're right.
yeah,
I can't deny it. It's like you and I, we've done that assessment thing, and you and I are both high Bs, which means we are sociable, kind of people pleasers.
Social butterflies.
Social butterflies. And we don't want people to not like us. We like it. We're charmers. We're promoters, persuaders. But yeah, we have a tendency to maybe take things a little bit personally, and we can, especially. I certainly have. So when you brought that up tonight over turkey chili, I was like, "Are you kidding me, Nico? I've had a really rough weekend. You bring that shit in here and start telling me that I can't." And it's true. I can't. I have a hard time of separating the emotion from it.
I think 97% of humans on Earth.
Yeah.
I think it's just how we are as people, and if you do enough self-work and self-education, you learn not to take things personally. But I mean, the amount of weight that you can just take off yourself if you just didn't take anything personally, so much anxiety and stress just disappears automatically. And then the don't assume. anything, also. Also, if you're disappointed that someone didn't do something that you did not tell them to do, you expect them to do it, you assume they would do it, knowing you well enough, but they didn't do it. One, you took it personally that they didn't do it. Two, you assumed without discussing it with that person that they would know you wanted to do something. Like, I found myself in relationships, I've found disappointment in relationships because I've put so much assumption on, I assume this person will change to know these things and do these things if they've been with me long enough. That is some shit that you go into a marriage and with assumptions, expectations, and taking things personally. No wonder 50% of first marriages end in divorce. 50% of marriages end in divorce.
Right.
Yeah. And so it just makes so much sense. Like, it just blew my mind when I read that. I thought about all the shit that I think throughout a day, and I'm like, man, 75% of that is because I'm taking shit personally that shouldn't be taken personally. I mean, it goes down to the smallest. We had like a 10-minute conversation upstairs with Evan, and we were able to point out like 7 times where one of us had taken something personally. Yeah, and it was like, oh my God, this is so prevalent.
And it will ruin your day. It will completely ruin your day. And when you finally get to a point that, well, the epiphany that you come to and you say, and you were sitting there behind us, and I'm talking to Evan about his situation. I said, well, and I did this, and you were like, you're assuming. And I'm like, fuck you.
Yeah, dude,
like, because it does. It becomes this, you can't deny it. And that's the ego that gets in the way, where you're like, I know that's right, but I'm just too stubborn to admit that I'm ready to accept that. And that's what it comes down to. Is like, are we ready to accept those kind of truths that are just logical?
It falls into every situation almost every situation that you can think of.
Yeah.
For example, let's say you're stuck working with someone in an office who is unaccepting of a gay lifestyle. And they're open about how they're unaccepting of a gay lifestyle.
Okay.
You and our society has seemed to have taken this choice. You can cancel that person as ignorant. They're ignorant. They'll never change. Fuck them. Let's not give them a platform. They can't speak. Maybe we should fire them.
Right.
You can do all that.
They're not part of our inclusive values.
No, we practice diversity and inclusion, but we do not include ignorance. The only way to change ignorance is to include it. So you can choose to take that
need to
personally.
say that statement again.
The only way to change ignorance is to include it. You can't tell someone to change.
Right.
You can say things all you want. They're not going to change.
Right.
You can't cut them out and expect them to change now.
Yeah.
You have to include them. I think if you work...
That is a harsh reality for a lot of people, because...
If you can't include them, that means you're taking it personally.
Because that's the primary goal. We have to accept... Because you're always telling me, what are primary, secondary goals? So primary goal, we have to accept ignorance in order to have this inclusion space. We have to accept that ignorance, because then we're, in some ways, nurturing a relationship on one-on-one, and that ignorance can cultivate into understanding. Okay.
How many movies do you see where, like, for example, it's 100, between 100 and 200 years ago, or in the last 70 years, when racism was very openly prevalent in our country. I know now there's still racism around in the country, but I mean, like, when black people couldn't use the same bathrooms. How many movies have you seen where a black person and a white person are forced to be around each other long enough to where they realize that being black and white doesn't actually get in the way of them being friends? Remember the Titans. Oh my God. Think about that.
Incredible movie.
Incredible movie.
Yeah.
But great example. And you've seen a lot of movies with this same lesson. Just because they're black and they're white, they realize that there's so much more to life that they have in common.
Right.
Had they cut each other out, you never would have had, desegregation. You know what I mean? And so if you cut out some dude who you worked with because he didn't like gay people, you would go on hating that person, they would go on
Mm-hmm.
hating you. It's when you have to include ignorance if you want to change it. Who knows how long it would take, but you spend enough time with a person who doesn't like one aspect,
Mm-hmm.
your sexual orientation, they're going to start to realize, I have a lot in common with this person that has nothing to do with
Right.
sexual orientation. That's how you change someone.
It is.
That is how you change someone. The one-on-one,
Mm-hmm.
you don't put them through diversity and inclusion courses,
Right.
you know what I mean, and then have them go home and not be diverse. You know what I mean? They have to spend every day in real life, a real life situation with someone who they are ignorant towards. And eventually, I mean, that's how you break down ignorance.
It is. And I think it is a personal responsibility of mine to separate and understand where my trauma triggers are for certain situations, because of those individuals who are in that ignorant space, not taking it personally, because the personal is equating everything back to my upbringing and how I was raised. And I have to separate that trauma. I'm like, this person is not them. This person is not these individuals that hurt me. And so I have to separate that. I can't assume that about them. They may be vocal about my lifestyle, but even in my deployments, that wasn't how we built our relationship. Our relationship was built knowing what I knew about their Christian fundamental beliefs and values that they had back home that they brought with them on these deployments. Where the relationship was built was after work at the crow's nest, having a beer, having a conversation with that individual, and me being able to ask, would you be open to telling me about your family? And them sharing me about their kids or something there at the bar. And that's where the relationship was cultivated and built, in that inclusion space. And I have to, in that sense, know that there was a mission for that individual and I, and that we had a very common space there of a mutual agreement, what we both wanted. What we both wanted was a good life, good family, and people who were around us and supported us and loved us. And that's all that mattered. And that what I carried my weight. I carried my part in the mission. And I can't walk into that and think, well, I got to try and change this person's mind completely about me before I can work with them. That's not a reality to work in, because every individual comes to the table that I come to with this different way of seeing things, how they were developed, all of that. It's too complex to even think that I could have the ego to say, well, because I'm gay, you have to start thinking this way.
It's never going to
That
work.
is so
Never has
unfair
worked.
to
Never
that
will work. Yeah.
That's so unfair to that individual. It's an evolution that we're always going to have to deal with, that in conversations like these, how we constantly work to say, what's the real issue here? How can we work around this to actually work together and stuff? There are some people that are completely living on an altered reality. I think it's pretty easy for us to define who those individuals are. But I don't think that is not the largest majority of our nation, of our world. I think they want to see how we can have compromise and work with one another and talk with each other. And then maybe that's just the extreme optimist in me.
And first off, another example, Dallas Buyers Club.
Perfect example. Yeah,
Perfect
yeah.
example of someone who just hated gay people.
Yeah.
Then by the end, he was very accepting.
Very accepting.
And that's
one of his best friends.
Yeah, it's not a fantasy. That should happen. That's a real life situation. And here's the ignorance, the circle of ignorance, and it all starts with taking something personally, which is crazy. Mm-hmm. You walk into that office, the person that you work with, very loud and vocal about not agreeing with the gay lifestyle. You take it personally. You cut them off. You make no attempt to work with them. Possibly they're fired or you cancel them, whatever. What you don't realize is you are ignorant now to their life experience, How have they developed these views? You don't care. You just kicked them out. The same way that they don't care why you're gay. They just don't like it. So now you have contributed ignorance to this circle. They are now cut off from you. They will remain ignorant.
Mm-hmm.
If anything, even more ignorant. I hate that person. That fag got me fired.
Mm-hmm.
Now it's another added level of ignorance, and it's just a circle. It's just a circle,
cycle.
and at its core, it starts with taking things personally.
Yeah, and allowing ourselves to be uncomfortable in any way. If we're looking to build that relationship and that inclusion, is to be able to say, to have the conversation. Would you be open to discussing why you feel that way? Or would you be able to have open to having a conversation? There's no acceptance in that. It's just like, let's have a conversation. Let's talk about it. Maybe there is something about your past that maybe I don't understand what has drawn you to this particular conclusion. And maybe eventually, if we find a common understanding, maybe we can figure out how to work this whole thing out.
And even
this whole inclusion thing out.
Even, I want to say before that conversation is, both do your jobs together, and maybe get to know each other in that manner. Yeah. Get to know each other a little bit before you say, well, let's talk this out. Why don't you like gay people? I want to hear about your background. Get to know each other.
Right.
Which should be the first step. You can't just expect people to like everything about you when you first meet them.
No.
And yeah, it usually those are small things. They might find things annoying about you and stuff like that. I don't like working with them. They're kind of annoying. But it goes to extremes. I don't like gay people. I don't like black people. I don't like white people. And you have to just be willing to get to know someone who says that to you. And that involves taking your ego out of the equation.
It does.
The ego loves to take things personally. Without a doubt.
It does.
Cool. All right. There's a little education.
Good conversation.
That was this week's episode of
Whatever.
Don't take things personally.
What are they? Don't take things.
Be impeccable with your word.
Don't take things personally. Don't assume, and always do your best.
There we go.
I like it.
Follow those
and put it on the board.
Yeah, exactly. All right.
Snail.
Snail.
Love you. Whatever.
Salt.
Bye.
Bye.